Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this new episode of the series of podcasts by the French-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Today's episode is the last episode this year, and it is very much in the now because we are going to talk about the state of Ukraine's economy and investment climate in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. And to start with some news, here is a weekly digest of developments related to Ukraine. The government underwent a minor reshuffling last week. Among other things, the parliament finally appointed a Minister of Education, although he is a controversial figure. And Ukraine, one of the world's grain baskets, finally has a Ministry of Agriculture for the first time in 1 year and a half. The Misto Bank was declared insolvent last week. It was a local bank with not such a large number of depositors. This insolvency may be seen in two ways. One negative, that Ukrainian banks are still fragile and likely to default. The National Bank actually indicated that 9 banks do not respect the legal requirements. And we can also see it positively in the sense that the National Bank acted swiftly to enforce the insolvency rules, while the state has moved in to support depositors. Representatives of FOP, that is to say private entrepreneurs, have been demonstrating on Maidan for a few days. They are one of the categories of the economic actors who are badly hit by the crisis. In the meantime, the government passed a series of measures aimed at supporting small and medium businesses, and the World Bank also allocated some $300 million to fight poverty in Ukraine. The government has tightened the grip on its quarantine policy in order to fight the coronavirus pandemic, yet no strict lockdown is planned before the 8th of January, after the Orthodox Christmas. This way, the authorities want to allow the economy to keep running during the end of the year's celebration, and it's also an opportunity to enjoy these celebrations freely, in accordance with sanitary rules, of course. By the way, if you are in Kiev, don't miss the Christmas tree on the Sofiska Ploshcha, Sofiska Square. It is magnificent. Let us now turn to our topic of the day. I thought it would be interesting to speak of macroeconomics and about the general state of Ukraine's economy and investment climate. I would like to recall that globally, it is accepted that the current crisis is the worst crisis since World War II. Let's listen to Gita Gopinath, Chief Economist and Director of the Research Department at the IMF.
Employment remains well below pre-pandemic levels, and the labor market is increasingly polarized, with low-skilled workers, youth, and women being harder hit. The poor are also getting poorer, with up to 90 million people expected to fall into extreme poverty just this year. The ascent out of this calamitous great lockdown is likely to be long, uneven, and highly uncertain.
The World Bank, for its part, estimates that at least 170 countries in the world will undergo a negative growth of GDP in 2020. But now let's move to Ukraine. Here there are also many things that are frightening. For example, the dramatic increase of the number of people who live below the poverty threshold. But there are also encouraging signs. I have found 2 experts to discuss the general outlook of Ukraine's economy. The first is Sergei Yanich, Head of Investment Business and Chief Economist at Ukrbank.
In my view, Ukrainian economy stood well against this crisis situation. And indeed, it performed much better than expectation and much better than average country performed in 2020. So this year, the contraction will likely land at around 5%. And this completely due to 2 factors. One factor is official lockdown in Q2. Another negative factor, as I said, was the performance of agriculture this year. For many years, this is the first year where, due to weather conditions, of course, the harvest has contracted by some 10 million tons. If last year we had 75 million tons of total harvest, this year it is likely to go down to 65, so less 10 million tons of harvest, and this is to have a pronounced impact both on GDP, but it's weather. So prospects to recover are rather bright.
And this is a very encouraging assessment. We all know Ukraine as a country that had to suffer from different crises over the years, and it apparently has the capacity to resist to different shocks. But still, in this particular case, how to explain this relative resilience of Ukraine? Sergei Yanich.
Several reasons for that. One of the main reasons is a gain in terms of trade following unfolding the crisis and the massive monetary response, global monetary authorities to be exact. The key central banks have pumped the liquidity into the system, and this led to increase in non-energy prices. And this is exactly where Ukrainian economy benefited from the situation, because most of Ukrainian exports is soft commodities, is agricultural exports combined with metals and mining products, which have reached some record price recently. So on one side, Ukraine faced growing export volumes. On another side, there is an energy bill, which Ukraine as netto energy importer pays every year. And this energy bill decreased several times due to less travel, consumption of fuel in absolute values, and also with prices of natural gas going south, it also positively impacted the balance of payments of Ukraine.
And there are even more encouraging signs. The reserves of foreign currency are higher now than 1 year ago, despite the interventions to stabilize the financial markets. The rating of Ukraine by international agencies is stable, and the Europeanization of the Ukrainian economy goes on within the framework of the association agreement and of the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, DCFTA.
The EU is and will remain Ukraine's biggest and most reliable partner. Our association agreement is the most ambitious that the EU has with any country, and we are fully committed to driving it forward, including in important areas like green and digital.
We just heard Charles Michel, the President of the European Council. I would like to recall that since the entry into force of the association agreement in 2016, trade flows have increased by 65%. The EU is the largest trade partner of Ukraine. And also, some important reforms were passed and implemented this year. And this is explained by my second guest, Sergei Tsivkach, CEO of Ukraine Invest.
This year, we completed our reform for decentralization. So from 1st of January 2021, we have a new system. Our country will be more decentralized in terms of budget sharing. We will have more powers and more money for the regions. And at the same time, they will have more responsibility to work with investors and make them feel comfortable in the regions. Also, Ukraine working actively since 2019 on deregulation and easing of conditions to do business. In 2020, we had landmark reform on agricultural land. So from 2021, there will be gradual beginning of land reform that will lead to full opening of Ukrainian agricultural market in terms of sale of land. Also, unbundling of national Naftogaz company has been completed as well, and we have now a new system of competitive market in terms of natural gas. The law on inner water transport has been voted in Parliament. New reform on city building. Also, the National Office of Intellectual Property has been created. And more importantly, during COVID and pandemic times, we have very active board of state in terms of digitalization of our country, of our state services, because as you are aware that companies that and countries that are better digitalized, they are more resistant to global challenges like pandemic and like economic crisis.
Ukraine Invest is in charge of attracting and supporting foreign investment in Ukraine. So Sergei Tsivkash is obviously delighted that the parliament passed the famous Investment Nanny bill into law on the 17th of December.
This is presidential initiative that provides for ability for investor, first of all, to receive state support in amount of up to 30% out of investment made. And minimum investment must be 20 million euros within 5 years' time. At the same time, investor will need to create at least 80 jobs and operate in specific sectors. These sectors are quite vast. Ukraine Invest potentially will be the organization that will be guiding investors from the point when they have an idea how to invest in Ukraine to the point when investor will be able to sign agreement with the government. And government in return, government on central level and regional governments, they will provide support in a form of tax relief, custom duties relief, communication to grids, building infrastructure, building roads. So I encourage all French companies and all other companies that listen to us to pay attention to this law.
This investment nanny is good news, but it is well known that obstacles to foreign investments are not only connected to the crisis or to cultural or linguistic factors. Despite some structural reforms being implemented this year, the mother of all reforms is still slow to come, and this is, of course, the reform of the judiciary. Sergei Yanich.
So, of course, Ukraine must do its homeworks, and not all homeworks have been done properly this year. Luckily, this year was very unusual in all parts of the world. So we see that international organizations are rather flexible approaching countries, in particular countries with financial problems. That there is an initiative to basically to write off some most indebted countries, the poor countries. In case of Ukraine, I would expect IMF also to be reasonably flexible, and I wish that Ukraine does more homeworks in terms of structural reforms. So many issues are on the table. I cannot say that the situation, of course, is perfect. However, again, on the international comparison, at this point of time, Ukraine stands relatively well.
Ukraine stands relatively well, but is it really the time to invest in the country? I asked Sergei Tsivkash at Ukraine Invest.
Absolutely. And I think the time is better than ever, and I will explain to you why. During crisis times, we face not only with problematic issues, but we also can use potential that arises from this problematic situation. For example, due to COVID and due to global lockdown, we can witness shortening of supply chains, and we can see a concept rising, and it's called among professionals like Second Asia. Why Second Asia? Because a lot of European countries and countries worldwide have been using Asian countries as manufacturing facilities, and during lockdown we could see that at least 20 to 30% of contracts were not fulfilled. So even European countries now looking at Ukraine more often, our neighbors, and we are very happy because of that. They approach us almost on daily basis with requests where they can locate manufacturing facilities. We're talking about European small and medium companies. We just recently supported Belgian company, and they already will be manufacturing their goods in Ternopil region, which is very promising. They will do pilot project, and they want to invest more, buy land and build proper facilities in Ukraine. Only this year, we have seen strong increase of location of manufacturing with high value added. So this year only, projects for total amount of $500 million have been started in Ukraine.
So there you have it. Despite the difficult and challenging international context, it does look like Ukraine has stood its ground. The fundamentals of the economy remain strong, and some reforms laid ground to a solid recovery next year, hopefully. And the French-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce will have a role to play. Sergei Tsivkach is expecting fruitful collaboration in 2021.
You're already doing a lot of work in Ukraine and created tens, thousands of jobs in Ukraine. But I'm sure that our future in terms of investment cooperation is bright and it's still ahead of us.
These are comforting words, and I would like to thank both of my guests for their optimistic comments. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the series of podcasts by the French-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. You listened to Sébastien Gobert. This was my last episode of the year 2020. So a bit in advance, I would like to extend my most sincere wishes for this year's end and for the beginning of the next year. Stay tuned in 2021 for more episodes of this series of podcasts. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.